Welcome to the Wife Stories YouTube channel. New video every day, and don't forget to subscribe. Here we go. From a young age, I was captivated by the power of words. Whenever I picked up a pen, the world seemed to disappear, leaving just me and the page. This passion grew with time, transforming writing into a way to navigate my emotions and find meaning in life. Meeting Lauren was life-changing. She embodied everything I'd ever hoped for and more. Our love story unfolded like a novel, filled with moments of joy, laughter, and occasional heartbreak, all of which we overcame together. We built a life, a family, and created memories I believe would endure forever. But life had other plans, shifting everything unexpectedly. Today, my daughter visited me. Unfortunately, it wasn't the heartfelt reunion either of us had imagined. Despite her kindness, the years of distance and unresolved pain made it impossible for me to truly reciprocate her warmth. She spoke with calm determination, but left without achieving her goal of reconciliation. I promised to think about it, but after she departed, I broke down in tears. Olivia, now a woman with a family of her own, still reminds me of the little girl I once held. She's intelligent, eloquent, and stunning, a devoted wife and mother, much like her own mother, both in appearance and stubbornness. She embodies everything a parent could dream of, so why hadn't I spoken to her until today? It began 5 years ago, spurred by her mother's actions. The last words I spoke to Olivia were at Lauren's funeral. Overwhelmed by grief, I told her she was as dead to me as her mother. I said the same to my son, John, making my feelings crystal clear to everyone present. The devastation in their eyes continues to haunt me. Clutching the hand of my youngest daughter, Elizabeth, I turned my back on them. Falling in love with Lauren was instant. It felt as though we'd always known each other. Our relationship was as effortlessly perfect as apple pie with vanilla ice cream. Even before our wedding, people often remarked that we looked like an old married couple. We tied the knot shortly after college and had just celebrated our 25th wedding anniversary when everything changed. Our 25th anniversary was a grand event on a sunny June day, surrounded by family and friends. My father shared the head table with Lauren's parents and our 3 children. Friends, neighbors, and even the mayor joined in the celebration. The mayor presented us with a plaque declaring June 14th, Lauren and Ethan Miles Day. Over 200 guests gathered beneath a massive tent, enjoying food, laughter, and dancing well into the night. During our vow renewal, emotions ran high. I was entirely absorbed in Lauren, the woman who completed me and whom I adored beyond measure. Everyone else, our children, the crowd, even our dog Max, faded into the background. Olivia had just returned from her honeymoon, John had completed his 2nd year of university, and Elizabeth had finished her first. Having the whole family together again was heartwarming. I secretly missed the lively chaos of a full house, and I knew Lauren did too. It felt like we'd come full circle. A few days after the party, while returning rental equipment, I accidentally dented my truck's fender. Later at home, I miscalculated a turn and clipped the headlight of a new Lexus. The responding officer, Nathan, was someone I'd known for years. He had grown up with John and played on his sports teams. Now taller and self-assured in his uniform, Nathan made me proud, as if he were one of my own. After finishing the paperwork, Nathan and I caught up briefly. As he shook my hand, he said, "Well, Mr. Miles, I need to head back to the station. It was nice seeing you again. Sorry I missed your anniversary party. My parents said it was amazing." I felt a swell of pride seeing the man he'd become. Then he added with a playful grin, "Oh, and tell Mrs. Miles to stop at stop signs from now on. Next time, it won't just be a warning." My confusion must have been obvious. "Hoops, I didn't mean to say that," Nathan stammered, clearly embarrassed. Trying to lighten the mood, I said, "It's fine, Nathan. Lauren doesn't always tell me about her tickets. She assumes I'll be mad and take away her driving privileges. I wouldn't, but I let her think that it gives me some leverage at dinner. What was the ticket for? I might tease her about it." "It's really no big deal," he replied, still flustered. "On Saturday the 31st, your wife turned onto Highway 40 from the Holiday Inn without stopping at the sign. She didn't hit anyone but accelerated quickly, so I had to pull her over and issue a warning for running the stop sign. No harm done. You did the right thing, Nathan, I assured him. I'll remind her to be more careful and maybe give her a little teasing for good measure. After unloading the chairs and tables, I sat in the truck, replaying my earlier conversation with Nathan. On the 31st, I'd been at my dad's house helping him with chores. It was 2 weeks after Olivia's wedding. I distinctly remembered taking Dad to tour an assisted living facility, though he'd shown no interest. I spent the entire Saturday with him and returned home late on Sunday. Lauren hadn't mentioned anything about the ticket, just said she'd spent a quiet afternoon reading. Dismissing Nathan's comment as a misunderstanding, I thought Lauren wouldn't lie to me. A month later, my sister called with alarming news. She'd found Dad on his kitchen floor. He had fallen, not injured, just confused. I already had plans to visit him that Saturday, hoping to convince him to move somewhere with more support. I doubted he'd agree. Dad's stubbornness was legendary. With John and Elizabeth home for the summer, I played the guilt card to get them to come along. You haven't seen Grandpa in a while, and he won't be around forever, I reminded them. Begrudgingly, they agreed. Lauren, however, seemed delighted at the prospect of a quiet house, saying she'd use the time to finish her book. During the drive, John chatted about a girl from his philosophy class, while Elizabeth announced she planned to focus on graduating college without distractions like boyfriends. Their discussion prompted me to recount, yet again, how Lauren and I had met. Dad was thrilled to see the kids, more animated than I'd seen him in years. We enjoyed lunch and spent a relaxing morning together. Around noon, Dad fell asleep, and we split up to let him rest. Keep an eye on Grandpa. I'll be back soon, I told John and Elizabeth. My plan was to grab a chainsaw and ropes from home to handle the dead tree in Dad's backyard. Driving home, I unexpectedly veered off the interstate onto Highway 40. At the bottom of the hill, I noticed the entrance to the Holiday Inn and almost absent-mindedly turned into the parking lot. As I approached the stop sign, I realized how easy it was to overlook, just as Lauren had done. Then I saw a car I recognized all too well. Lauren's silver Skoda with her distinctive license plate. My stomach dropped. Curious, I got out and peeked inside her car. It looked normal. The doors were locked. I called the house, no answer. Next, I called Lauren's cell. "Hi, honey." "How are you?" she answered cheerfully. I forced a casual tone. "Oh, nothing much. I'm out grocery shopping for Dad and thought I'd call. I rang the house, but since you didn't pick up, I tried your cell. Where are you?" Her response hit me like a punch. "I'm at the mall. I finished my book and decided to do some shopping. You don't mind, do you?" she said lightly. I hesitated, my thoughts racing. "No, just don't spend too much. What time will you be home?" "Around 6. Do you want me to make dinner?" she offered. "No, I'm not feeling great. I might stay at Dad's tonight and send the kids home," I replied. "Okay. Call me when you decide," she said, sounding concerned. "Lauren, did you go to the mall alone?" I pressed. "Yes, by myself." "Why?" "Just wondering." "Have a good time. And avoid Nathan at the Holiday Inn stop sign tonight," I added pointedly. Her response was quick. "Bye." She hung up before I could say more. Then I heard a muffled scream from the hotel's direction. Alarmed, I looked around and saw nothing. I decided to wait by Lauren's car. A few minutes later, a police cruiser arrived. Nathan stepped out. "Hello, Mr. Miles. Did you call emergency services?" he asked. "No," I replied, confused. "Well, someone reported a car break-in. I'll talk to the manager," Nathan said before heading inside. "Nathan," I called after him. "Can you do me a favor?" "Sure, anything," he replied. "Check if Mrs. Miles is here and who she's with. I'll wait next door," I requested. Nathan hesitated but nodded. "I'll find out and get back to you." The wait felt endless. Sirens pierced the air as an ambulance arrived. I watched, stunned, as paramedics wheeled someone out on a stretcher. Nathan returned, looking grim. "Mr. Miles, I'm so sorry. Your wife tried to run through a sliding glass door and got hurt. She's at County Hospital, bruised and hysterical. The man with her left when the ambulance did. I have his details, but you'll need to file a form at the station to access them. I'm really sorry. He extended his hand, but I couldn't bring myself to take it. After Nathan left, I broke down, tears blurring my vision. Somehow, I made it back to Dad's house. Standing in the driveway dazed, Elizabeth spotted me and ran outside. "What's wrong?" she asked, alarmed. I couldn't answer. When John joined us, I managed to choke out, "Your mom's in the hospital. Go help her." Without further explanation, I tossed John the car keys and watched as they drove off, confused and worried. I stayed behind, making sure Dad was okay before collapsing on the couch. Later, Dad stirred and joined me. "What's wrong, Ethan?" he asked gently. We rarely discussed personal matters, so I didn't respond, expecting him to tell me to man up. Instead, he surprised me. "After you were born, I stole from work to buy your mom a dress. I got caught, repaid the money, and ended up on probation. Your mom was furious, hurt, and disappointed, but one day, she found me a job lead, hugged me, and forgave me. That changed everything. Maybe you need forgiveness or need to forgive like she did. I'm proud of you, Ethan. I love you." He placed a comforting hand on mine and prayed silently before leaving. I stayed on the couch, utterly drained. As night fell, I ignored my ringing phone, feeling like I was teetering on the edge. The next morning, after making breakfast for Dad, I retreated to the backyard alone. Around noon, I felt a hand on my shoulder. "Hey, Dad, are you okay?" Elizabeth asked, her eyes red and tired. I shook my head, unable to lie. She hugged me tightly, just like when she was little, and we both cried. Eventually, she said, "Dad, Mom's okay physically. She has a concussion, 4 stitches, a broken nose, and bruises, but emotionally, she's a wreck. The doctor gave her something to help her sleep, but she woke up screaming your name. Olivia and I have been with her. She keeps asking why you aren't there. She told us what happened, and I confronted her. I told her what she did was unforgivable and that I hated her." "Don't say you hate your mother," I interrupted sharply. "She loves you, and you love her. She made a mistake, and I need to figure out what to do." "Dad, she cheated and lied to us. She doesn't deserve our love." Elizabeth shot back, tears in her voice. "It doesn't matter. She's your mother," I said firmly, though my heart felt heavy. "But she's also your wife. Do you still love her after what she did?" Elizabeth pressed on. I stayed silent, grappling with emotions too raw to confront. "I don't know," I admitted finally. "I'm still in shock. I need time to sort out my feelings. Right now, it hurts too much to think clearly." "Dad, whatever you decide, I'll always support you. I love you," she said. We hugged again, watching a hummingbird dart between the trees as we both drifted into our thoughts. I spent the weekend with Dad, taking phone calls from Olivia and John, but refusing to speak to Lauren. I wasn't ready. On Monday, I called work and took a few more days off. For the next 3 days, I sat in the backyard, drowning in sorrow. Elizabeth never left my side, keeping a close eye on me. She worried, but I couldn't shake my despair. The 25 years Lauren and I had spent together played over in my mind. Things hadn't been perfect, but the good far outweighed the bad. I didn't know the full extent of what she'd done, and I didn't want to. What little I did know was already unbearable. Elizabeth brought me meals, though most went uneaten. The food left untouched beside a roll of paper towels, soaked with my tears. 2 days after my world imploded, a familiar voice startled me. "Hey, Ethan." Without turning, I muttered, "Hi, Lauren." She sat across from me, looking dreadful. Her face was bandaged and bruised, her stitches stark against her pale skin. She seemed almost unrecognizable, and the sight of her only deepened my pain. "I'm sorry, Ethan," she began, staring at her battered hands. "I know it's not enough, but it's all I have. Olivia drove me here because I can't drive myself. I needed to see you, to talk about what I did. It was my fault, not yours. You didn't deserve any of it. I hurt myself as much as I hurt you. I might have ruined something more important to me than life itself. I just want to explain." "No," I cut her off. "I don't want to hear it. What I already know was destroying me. Don't say anything more. But even if you understand why I was weak, maybe you'll forgive me, she pleaded. I said no. I shouted, standing abruptly and walking away as she sobbed behind me. Daddy, please listen to her, Olivia begged, catching me in the kitchen. She needs you to hear her and forgive her. If you think listening to her will help, you're more deluded than she is, I snapped. If she needs to ease her conscience, let her write a letter. I can't hear her excuses for ruining 25 years of marriage. I don't have the strength to forgive her right now. I grabbed my car keys and left, driving aimlessly, unsure if I'd ever return. The next day, I went back to Dad's house, where Elizabeth greeted me with a warm smile and a tight hug. Her smile gave me a faint glimmer of hope, though it didn't help me resolve anything. Dad, I've decided to move in with you for a while, she announced. I need time away, and you need help with cooking and cleaning. Believe me, Dad, your breakfasts need more than just eggs and bacon. She grinned, softening the blow. Can you help me get my things from home? I can't go there while Mom's there, but I need some stuff for work. Just tell everyone we're separated. No details, okay? Later, Elizabeth brought back my belongings. I packed my stuff too, she said decisively. I'll stay in the guest room until school starts. Over the next 2 months, life settled into an uneasy routine. I went to work, helped around the house, and taught Elizabeth how to make lasagna. Olivia and John called occasionally, asking when I'd come home. I suspected Lauren was behind their questions, waiting for my answer. Each time, I told them I wasn't ready and hung up when they pushed too hard. One day, John visited. We sat on the patio as he spoke. Dad, it's been 2 months. Mom's worse. I have to leave for school soon, and I can't leave Olivia to handle everything alone. Mom's not eating or sleeping. She's crying all the time, and even her friends are worried. You've punished her enough. Please come home. I looked at him, my heart breaking. This wasn't the boy I'd coached through Little League or helped earn his Eagle Scout badge. His values had shifted, and I didn't recognize the man he was becoming. John, I said firmly, if you support what your mother did, then you've changed for the worse. Go home and take care of her. I'll stay here until I decide otherwise. Now leave before I lose my temper. He stormed off, and I heard his car pull away. By mid-September, I received a letter from Lauren. Though I told Olivia she should write to ease her conscience, I couldn't bring myself to read it. The pain was still too raw. Instead, I focused on Elizabeth's calls and planned for my 50th birthday in October. Elizabeth arrived on the morning of my birthday, determined to cheer me up. After a festive Italian dinner, we settled in the living room. Dad, have you decided? She asked. Sighing, I said, I've decided I need to talk to Lauren. I don't know everything about what happened or why. Ignoring her won't fix anything. If we can't reconcile, I'll file for divorce. But we need to talk. I'll call her tomorrow. Before we could say more, Elizabeth's phone rang. After a brief conversation, she returned pale and trembling. Dad, Mom's dead, she sobbed. Olivia found her in the bathroom. She swallowed sleeping pills. I couldn't process her words. Lauren, the woman I loved for 25 years, the mother of my children, was gone. Planning her funeral was surreal. Each night I sat in Dad's backyard, staring at the swing set where our kids used to play in the azalea bushes Lauren and I had planted. Though I didn't place the pills in her hand, my refusal to speak to her contributed to her despair. I wanted her to feel my pain because I loved her so deeply. She did the one thing that could destroy me, and in response, I may have destroyed her. I never wanted Lauren to die. I just wanted her to understand the hurt she caused. Now, I'll never know if that was possible. She ruined our marriage, and I ruined our chance at reconciliation. We were both wrong. May God have mercy on our souls. Tomorrow is Lauren's funeral, my final chance to see her. I needed to control my emotions, face our friends and family, and say goodbye without breaking down. As I sat in the quiet evening, I heard a car roar down the street. Olivia approached from the back door. Dad, are you okay? She whispered, settling into a chair across from me. No, not really, I admitted. We sat in silence, the rustling leaves filling the air. Olivia broke it with words that cut me to the core. None of this would have happened if you had come home and forgiven her. She made a mistake. You've probably made mistakes she forgave. She said she couldn't live without you. Your pride destroyed her. Stunned, I stared at her, speechless. My own daughter blamed me for Lauren's death. I hadn't had an affair or lied to friends and family. I hadn't swallowed pills to escape guilt. Olivia continued, tomorrow will be tough. Everyone's invited to the house afterward. You don't have to do anything or even stay if you don't want to. John and Mom's friends will help with the food. She didn't want me at the funeral. Maybe she thought I was too emotional, or maybe I was just too stressed to understand her intentions. Regardless, I avoided confrontation, retreating to the family room to sleep. The next morning, I dressed in a suit and tie. Elizabeth, already ready, came over to adjust my tie, just like her mother used to. We walked to the waiting limo hand in hand, her head bowed in silence. At the funeral home, the atmosphere was chilling. Friends crowded the foyer, their expressions unreadable. As Elizabeth and I entered the viewing room, I noticed something unsettling. Disdain and contempt, not pity. Few met my eyes. A couple of acquaintances offered polite condolences, but the whispers behind me spoke louder than words. Unforgiving creep. He left her. Hypocrite. He drove her to this. Elizabeth squeezed my hand, her face tense from hearing the murmurs. We knelt at the casket, the soft organ music failing to soothe the moment. The preacher's words were kind, and a friend sang one of Lauren's favorite hymns. But the air felt cold, heavy with judgment. Olivia spoke last. Her eulogy centered on mercy and forgiveness. She reminded everyone how even Jesus forgave those who crucified him. Her words stung, and for the first time, I began to grasp her perspective. At the gravesite, a bitter wind cut through us as the preacher delivered the final rites. Each of us was handed a red rose to place on Lauren's casket. I went first, followed by Elizabeth, Olivia, and John. My father's old work buddy helped him pass the casket. It was one of the most painful days of my life. Before we left, I stopped Olivia and John, anger simmering in my chest. Olivia, John, I know what you did, and I've made a decision. Because of your actions, defending your mother and painting me as a monster, you're dead to me, just like the woman we buried today. Don't speak to me. Don't come to my house. I am no longer your father. I turned to the crowd, my voice cold. That includes all of you. Shocked silence followed. Taking Elizabeth's hand, I walked to the limo, leaving Olivia and John behind. Only a few people, my boss, his wife, and two old friends, came back to the house afterward. They, along with Elizabeth, were all the friends I had left. Elizabeth returned to school, and I was left alone, surrounded by a life I barely recognized. Olivia and John stayed distant, caring for each other and Lauren's memory. Elizabeth kept me updated about the family, occasionally slipping in tidbits about her siblings. Lauren's letter revealed that her lover had been an old neighbor, a man who had even attended our 25th anniversary party. The betrayal lingered in my mind, but over time, the pain dulled. Olivia had a daughter, Lauren, and later a son, Chance. I never met them. John married his college sweetheart but divorced 2 years later after cheating on her, repeating the same behavior he once defended in his mother. He moved to California and I never saw him again. Work became my refuge. My boss, now my closest friend, gave me the space I needed to recover. 4 years later, I was promoted to senior manager and moved to Florida, selling the house filled with painful memories. Elizabeth graduated with honors and took a management position nearby, moving in with me until she could find her own place. Dad passed away a year after Lauren. 5 years after my life fell apart, I had rebuilt a quiet, solitary existence with my 2 golden retrievers. But even Elizabeth, my last anchor, began carving out her own life, leading me to confront my future. Needing purpose, I rediscovered my passion for writing. Starting with short stories, I sold a few to local magazines. One weekend, I outlined a story about the hardest time of my life. Hesitant at first, I poured myself into the manuscript over 4 months. Writing became my therapy, helping me face and release the demons of the past. After finishing the manuscript, I boxed it away, not ready for anyone to read it. Instead, I enrolled in a creative writing class at the local community college. There, I befriended 2 other seniors, Maurice, a retired history enthusiast writing about his family's Civil War ties, and Charlotte, a widow seeking new interests after raising 5 children. Charlotte and I grew close, finding common ground in our shared experiences. One evening, she realized she'd been doing all the talking and asked about my story. Nervously, I invited her to dinner, promising to share. Over vegetable lasagna, she smiled warmly. "I don't know many men who can cook like this. What other surprises do you have?" I laughed. "Not many. I manage a distribution center, live with my daughter, and have 2 golden retrievers. My wife died 5 years ago, and I've sold a few short stories. That's me, a pretty boring nutshell." "You promised me your story, remember?" she prodded. Instead of answering, I brought out the manuscript. "This is about the biggest events of my life. Writing it helped me process everything. The pain of losing my wife and my family falling apart. I haven't shown it to anyone. I'd love your opinion." She looked at me with admiration. "I'd love to read it. What's it called?" "Fair Weather Friends," I replied. "Wow, it's heavy," Charlotte said, hefting the manuscript. 987 pages. "I promise I'll give you my honest opinion." I hadn't shown it to Elizabeth yet. I was worried it might bring up old feelings, I admitted. "Ethan, I'd love to read it," she assured me. "I'm particular, and I tell it like it is, so you'll get the truth. I'll start tomorrow." We chatted about writing classes, Florida nightlife for people our age, and our favorite movies. It was a pleasant evening, and for once, the Florida weather cooperated. As I walked her to her car, she kissed me on the cheek. For the first time in years, I felt like a teenager again. Charlotte missed the next writing class, and I hadn't heard from her since our dinner. I began to wonder if she'd read my manuscript and decided I was a freak. 2 weeks later, she left a message on my answering machine. "Hi, Ethan. It's Charlotte. I'd like you to come over for dinner Friday night. My son is in town, and I'd like you to meet him. I may have a surprise for you, so bring a bottle or 2 of that nice white wine we had the other day. Be here at 7. Call me back to let me know. Bye." On Friday, I dressed casually but neatly and brought 2 bottles of a wine recommended by a local magazine. Though I knew nothing about wine, the article had praised it, and I trusted the writer. Charlotte greeted me warmly at the door, her smile lighting up her face. She gave me a tour of her house before leading me to the patio, where a small table for 3 was set with candles and glasses. A man stepped out from between 2 orange trees, walking into the light of the dining area. "Ethan, I'd like you to meet my son, Alex." "Alex, this is Ethan Miles." "It's a pleasure to meet you," Alex said, shaking my hand. "Mom's told me a lot about you. She's impressed, and trust me, that doesn't happen often." "It's nice to meet you too, Alex, but whatever she said is probably exaggerated," I joked. Charlotte excused herself to chill the wine, leaving Alex and me at the table. When she returned and sat down, she took my hand, her expression suddenly serious. "Ethan," she began, "I invited you here under slightly false pretenses. We'll eat soon, but first, I want to share some amazing news. I think it'll surprise you in a good way, I hope. My son came here today to meet you because I did something you might not approve of. But it's too late to change it now, so if you're upset, just let me have it." She paused, then added, "I finished your book in 2 days, Ethan. I couldn't put it down. It's the most inspiring and heartbreaking story I've ever read. I cried when you moved in with your dad, and again when you described your children at the end. I had to share it with Alex, so I sent it to him." I stared at her, dumbfounded, as Alex picked up where she left off. "Mom's right, Mr. Miles. Your book is incredible. I work at Apprentice Press in New York as an assistant managing editor. My job is to screen manuscripts from new authors, and I have to say, this is the best book I've ever read. I usually reject most submissions, but yours went through our review process and we want to publish it. We can discuss the details after dinner. But congratulations, you've written something truly special." I sat frozen, my mind spinning. Charlotte's smile widened, and she kissed me on the forehead before heading to the kitchen to finish dinner. As I regained the ability to speak, we discussed the book in detail, both of us tearing up at certain parts. Over a meal of mahi-mahi and peach cobbler, Alex outlined the publication process, promotion, and royalties. By the end of the evening, my head was spinning with excitement and disbelief. Charlotte poured the last of the wine as we sat together in the cool night breeze. We joked about being famous like Stephen King or J.K. Rowling, though I knew I wasn't in their league. Still, it was fun to dream. When it was time to leave, Charlotte walked me to my car. This time she kissed me deeply, a kiss that touched something I thought had long since died. At that moment, I realized that at 55 years old, I still had so much life left to live. For the next 3 months, I worked closely with Apprentice Press, revising and polishing my manuscript. After transferring it into their preferred software, I found myself editing obsessively, catching new tweaks each time I read it. My editor had warned me about this, and she was right. I worked long days at Fox Industries and spent evenings refining my novel. Elizabeth was thrilled about the book, but respected my wish for her not to read it until I had the first published copy. She made sure I ate, exercised, and kept a balanced routine. Charlotte, meanwhile, only visited on weekends, not wanting to disrupt my creative energies. We grew closer, her companionship acting as a balm for the wounds I carried for years. On May 1, my book, Fair Weather Friends hit store shelves. I was contractually obligated to do several in-person signing events, one of which was in my old hometown of Delaware. I was both alarmed and exhilarated by the whirlwind of the book tour. For 28 straight days, my routine was a blur, traveling to a new city by plane or train, checking into a hotel without unpacking, heading to a book signing, and meeting readers who shared how my book had impacted their lives. While I genuinely enjoyed connecting with fans, the constant travel and impersonal hotels quickly became monotonous. Charlotte surprised me by showing up at 2 of the signings unannounced. Her presence turned those stops into moments of joy. She acted shy and playful, while I pretended to be the charming author seducing a local admirer. She stayed overnight each time, her warmth easing the aches and exhaustion from travel. When she left, I felt a hollow ache, longing for her presence. Phone calls weren't enough. I missed holding her close. For the first time in years, I felt the stirrings of love and hope she felt the same. The final stop on my tour was my hometown, a visit I'd specifically requested. Apprentice Press graciously accommodated me. The bookstore was only a few miles from my old house, and the event was set to begin at 9. When I arrived, a long line of people had already formed near a table stacked with copies of my book. A large poster displayed the book cover alongside an announcement of the signing. Recognizing some faces in the crowd, I was surprised to see my former boss and his wife at the front of the line. I greeted them with hugs and exchanged contact information, promising to take them out for dinner on my next visit. Their presence filled me with joy, almost distracting me from the growing line behind them. For hours, I signed books, chatted with readers, and occasionally posed for pictures. To my surprise, several old friends, people who had avoided me at Lauren's funeral, approached. They apologized quietly for their past behavior, admitting they had judged me unfairly. I was humbled and moved by their honesty. The most surreal encounter came when Sandra Rios approached my table. She was Phil's ex-wife, and her presence startled me. Smiling awkwardly, she held out a copy of my book. "Hi, Ethan," she began. "I'm sorry to see you again under these circumstances, but I felt I should come and share a little sympathy. I can't apologize for what Phil did to you. But if it helps, I kicked him out shortly after Lauren died. We've been divorced for 4 years, and I'm engaged to someone new now. Also, you might have heard a rumor that you were looking for Phil to get revenge. Well, I started that rumor. Phil must have believed it because one day, he quit his job and moved to the Arabian Peninsula. I haven't seen him since." Her words left me momentarily speechless. Finally, I took her book and signed it. To Sandra, no fair weather friend. I hope the words in this book bring you the deliverance I found. Thanks for listening, Ethan. I stepped around the table and hugged her briefly before she walked away. Near the end of the signing, I looked up and saw Olivia standing by a book rack. She watched me silently, her expression subdued. I glanced away to greet another fan, and when I looked back, she was gone. I searched the store but couldn't find her. The last person in line was Elizabeth. She hugged me warmly, and we chatted as she walked me to her car. She drove me to my hotel, thankfully not a Holiday Inn, and we sat in the car for a long while talking about Charlotte. Elizabeth approved of her and was curious about my feelings. When I admitted I thought I was falling in love, she hugged me and cried softly on my shoulder. A police car pulled up nearby, and the officer flashed his headlights. Sergeant Nathan stepped out, smiling warmly as he tapped on the window. It felt like a mini reunion as we laughed, hugged, and caught up. Before he left, I gave him a signed copy of my book, inscribed with, "Asterisk to Nathan, meeting you changed my life." Someone had to do it. Ethan, asterisk. After dinner at the house, Elizabeth and I reflected on the visit. Returning to my hometown wasn't as traumatic as I had feared. Weeks later, a bigger shock awaited me when Olivia showed up at my door. Charlotte and I had just finished breakfast and were discussing the bestseller list. My book had reached number 3 in nonfiction when the knock came. "Hi, Daddy. How are you?" Olivia asked, her tone hesitant and slightly embarrassed. "I'm fine, Olivia. What can I do for you?" I replied, unsure of her intentions. "I was just in the neighborhood and thought I'd stop by," she said awkwardly. "This neighborhood is 900 miles from yours, Olivia. That's quite out of the way, don't you think?" I said, raising an eyebrow. Charlotte stepped up beside me, her hand resting on my shoulder. "Would you like to introduce me, Ethan?" she asked firmly but kindly. "Charlotte, this is my daughter, Olivia," I said. Charlotte moved past me and hugged Olivia warmly. "Come on in," she said. "I've heard so much about you." The two women walked into the living room, leaving me behind in the kitchen. They sat at the table, talking and laughing for over an hour while I busied myself with household chores. Occasionally, I glanced into the living room to see Charlotte cooing over photos of Olivia's children, her expressions a mix of awe and delight. "Honey, come out here and join us," Charlotte called. I knew better than to ignore her tone, so I set aside what I was doing and sat beside her. She immediately grabbed my hand, holding it firmly, not out of affection, but to ensure I wouldn't leave. Olivia's eyes fell on our intertwined fingers, her expression unreadable. The silence stretched uncomfortably until Charlotte broke it with her usual directness. "Okay, since neither of you wants to speak, I will. Ethan, I invited Olivia here because she wants to tell you something. I know you wouldn't have invited her yourself, so I took the liberty. I'm just a guest in your house, but if you want me to keep being one, you'll sit here and listen to her." Cornered, I leaned back in resignation, preparing myself for whatever was coming. "Dad," Olivia began, her voice trembling, "I came to see how you're doing, and that's not a lie. But I also came to apologize. I was wrong about so many things. I blamed you for everything that happened to Mom, to John, to me. I thought it was all your fault. But after reading your book, I saw things differently. I saw you. I realized how much pain you were in, and I felt ashamed. When we were kids, I always thought you were invincible, unaffected by anything. You were so calm, so quiet about your feelings. But I know now that was your way of shielding yourself and us. Mom broke through that shield, and I can't imagine how deeply she hurt you. Yet I still blamed you. I believe that if you'd been strong enough to forgive her, everything would have been fine. But I see now that walking away was its own kind of strength. I was wrong to abandon you." Olivia paused, tears welling in her eyes. "After Mom died, I told people it was your fault, that you pushed her to it. I've spent the last few years trying to undo that. I gave copies of your book to Mom's old friends and told them the truth, that you didn't deserve what happened, and that you suffered more than anyone could imagine. I saw you at the book signing a few weeks ago. I wanted to hug you, but I was too scared. Today, I'm here to say I'm sorry. I want you to be part of my life again. It's been over 5 years. You have 2 beautiful grandchildren you've never met. I want you to come home, Dad. I don't want to be dead to you anymore. I love you. I need you to love me again." She lowered her head, tears streaming down her face. The weight of her words brought a wave of guilt crashing over me. I glanced at Charlotte, who silently encouraged me to respond. "Stalin," I asked, "what about John? How does he feel about me? Did he know you were coming here?" Olivia wiped her tears and shook her head. John, he's a mess. I think what happened with Mom hurt him the most. After Lori divorced him for cheating, he spiraled. He's been bouncing from one relationship to another, some of them married women. He's living recklessly, like he's punishing himself. He doesn't know I'm here, and frankly, I don't care what he thinks. He's not ready to face this. Her answer didn't give me enough time to sort my thoughts. I stalled again. What are your plans now? Are you staying in town? I'm staying with Elizabeth. She wanted me to see her new apartment, so I'll be there for a couple of days. After that, I'll head home. Take your time, Dad. I didn't even expect this much from you today. Thank you. Olivia stood and smiled through her tears. Charlotte, it was wonderful meeting you. Please take care of my dad. As quickly as she'd arrived, she was gone. I sat there, grappling with everything Olivia had said. Charlotte stayed beside me, her calm presence a lifeline. When we were finally alone, I let my emotions spill out, no longer hiding my tears. Months later, Charlotte and I returned from a cruise, a gift from Apprentice Press after * Fair Weather Friends * hit #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. We flew straight to Delaware, where I finally met my 2 grandchildren, now 2 and 4 years old. Olivia and I began rebuilding our relationship, creating new memories to replace the painful ones of the past. Charlotte's wisdom as a grandmother helped me navigate the awkwardness of meeting the little ones for the first time. But the best moment came during dinner with Olivia's family when Charlotte and I announced our engagement. We'd made the decision during the cruise and wanted to share the news in person. Elizabeth had already started planning the wedding, eager to celebrate this new chapter in our lives. Charlotte and I visited her children next, sharing the same joyful news. Neither of us had imagined our lives turning out this way. In our youth, we believed in the fairy tale of one true love lasting forever. But life had its own plans. I had 25 good years with Lauren, and now I look forward to at least 25 more with Charlotte.